You think you can just block my bridge? This is my land. Actually, Mr. Kane, according to our updated boundary assessment, that structure falls under HOA jurisdiction. Payment is due in 10 days. When Marcus Bennett returned from a 4-day trip to find his only bridge chained shut, drilled into concrete with an HOA logo stamped on it like a battle flag, he knew this wasn't about property lines. This was war. The Vermont mountains hold a silence most people never experience. Not emptiness, but presence. Maple leaves rustling overhead. Stone Creek tumbling over ancient rocks. Old timber settling in the dawn chill. That quiet was home. The reason Marcus had spent 18 years building this place, one board at a time, one paycheck at a time. Nobody had questioned his bridge in all those years. Nobody tried claiming the ground beneath his feet, until he came back from visiting his army buddy in Burlington and found thick black chains wrapped across the bridge entrance, bolted into concrete like someone had planted a flag. A bright aluminum sign hung in the center. HOA property. Access revoked. Marcus wasn't part of any HOA. Never had been. His land sat 3 miles north of Riverside Meadows development, far from their manicured lawns and golf carts. Yet, here they were, claiming territory like conquistadors. He crouched beside the chains. The bolt heads were still warm. Whoever did this hadn't left long ago. Scanning the tree line from instinct, years of solitude teaching him to spot what doesn't belong, Marcus caught a glint of light. A small black camera aimed at his bridge, wired to a battery pack hidden under dead leaves. The quiet changed. It didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt watched. "This isn't a mistake," Marcus said under his breath. "This is a move." His truck couldn't cross with chains that could stop a tank, so he backed up, parked on the far side, and took the long trail through the woods. By the time he reached his porch, anger made every step heavier. Inside, he found an envelope on his kitchen table. Plain, cheap, no stamp, boundary reassessment, unauthorized land usage, payment required. The paperwork read like a threat written by someone who'd never met a real lawyer. Marcus believed in starting with truth before swinging at lies. He dialed the number printed at the bottom. Riverside Meadows Homeowners Association. "This is Karen speaking." Of course, her name was Karen. "Ma'am, my name is Marcus Bennett. I received a notice stating my bridge encroaches on HOA land. I'm calling to clear up what I'm sure is a misunderstanding." Her voice sharpened instantly. "There's no misunderstanding, Mr. Bennett. According to our updated boundary assessment, your structure partially falls within Riverside Meadows jurisdiction." Marcus glanced at Stone Creek, the same creek that had marked his property line since purchase day. "My bridge is on my land. Surveyed, stamped, inspected, and approved. Your jurisdiction ends 3 miles south." A pause. Not the kind where someone considers your words. The kind where they prepare something smug. "Our maps supersede outdated documents. If you wish to dispute the charges, you may do so through appropriate legal channels, but the board has voted. The fees stand." "Let me see those maps." "We don't release internal assessments to non-members." Non-members, meaning him, meaning the man whose bridge they just chained shut. Something settled in Marcus then. Slow, heavy, inevitable. The first click of a storm door caught in wind? "All right, if that's the game you want to play, then we'll play." Her voice brightened like she was offering a grocery coupon. "Payment is due within 10 days. Have a wonderful afternoon." She hung up. No conversation, no courtesy, no proof, only entitlement, and the echo of a woman who had no idea what kind of fight she'd just stepped into. When people lie, they rarely do it cleanly. There's always a wrinkle, a corner peeling up where truth tries escaping. The HOA's letter had plenty of peeling corners. Marcus brought the papers to his desk and laid everything flat. The boundary reassessment was missing every legal requirement a real survey needs, but the attached map made his coffee go sour. Glossy print, thick red X over his bridge, property lines bent like someone drew them during a seizure, a faint gray caption reading HOA Zone Revised Expansion Overlay. Expansion. That word again. The coordinate grid didn't match rural mapping standards. The watermark was stretched. The survey seal was the wrong shape entirely. Someone hadn't just made a mistake. They'd fabricated evidence. Then another thought hit him. The camera. He'd been too focused on that glinting lens to examine the ground. Now he wanted evidence. Marcus grabbed his coat and followed the trail back to where the device had been hiding. The forest was quiet, in a way that means every creature within 50 yards is listening. He crouched, reached under dead leaves, and pulled the camera free. Weatherproof? Night vision? Motion? Triggered? Someone wanted to see him at the bridge. Then he looked down. Fresh boot prints, size 10 or 11, deep tread. Someone heavier than him, or at least not trying to walk lightly. The prints led from roadside straight to where the camera had been nestled. The dirt was still damp, edges sharp. Whoever planted this device had done it recently. Hours ago, maybe less. A slow burn started behind his ribs. Not panic, not rage. Resolve. Cold, steady, old soldier resolve. Marcus pocketed the camera and stood, looking across the valley. The roofs of Riverside Meadows gleamed in the distance. Same color, same angles, same personality. Little toy boxes stacked in rows. Somewhere among them was a person who thought they could push a man off his own land with nothing more than paper, lies, and a padlock. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Inside his house, Marcus set the forged map on the table, placed the camera beside it, and pulled the SD card out with a quiet click. Whatever was on this thing could be the difference between suspicion and proof. But before checking it, the caption at the bottom of the map caught his eye again. Expansion overlay. Overlay? Meaning there was another document this was based on? Probably something internal? Probably something they didn't want outsiders seeing. Probably something stupid enough that someone had leaked it somewhere on the internet because HOA boards love making PDFs they shouldn't. Marcus powered on his computer and muttered, "Let's see exactly what you idiots are planning to lay over my land." As the screen lit his desk in cold blue, the war officially began. HOAs love paperwork. They love meetings, reports, and most of all, saving everything in PDF form, which also means they love leaking things by accident. Marcus typed Riverside Meadows HOA overlay expansion into the search bar, half expecting nothing more than gardening newsletters and passive-aggressive meeting notes, but 3 links down, he found something that made his eyebrows pull together. A file on a community cloud drive, public, no password, just sitting there like a trap someone forgot to hide. Riverside Meadows Phase 2 Planning Draft.pdf. Draft meaning not final, meaning someone uploaded it early, meaning someone out there had no idea what they'd just given him. He clicked. The document opened in all its self-important glory. 23 pages of corporate fonts, stock photos of smiling families, and phrases like Future Community Integration Corridor, Creek Adjacency Optimization, Shared Access Improvement Initiative. You could smell the consultants through the screen. Marcus scrolled to the maps. There it was. His land, his creek bend, his bridge sitting directly across a dashed red arrow labeled Preferred Northern Access Route Phase 2. The arrow pointed straight to his bridge site. Not near it, not adjacent, straight to it. The plan notes read, Current conditions, no established community access route, potential obstacle, private bridge owned by non-member landholder. Obstacle. That's what he was to them. Below that, recommendation, jurisdiction claim via boundary reassessment to secure northern ingress. There it was, the smoking gun. This wasn't a misunderstanding or overreach. This was strategy. They'd laid it out like a blueprint for burglary. Marcus scrolled further. A small section near the bottom had been highlighted, maybe by the last person who handled the file. Projected benefits of northern access. Reduced drive time for residents. Emergency response shortcuts. Connection to regional road system. Expansion viability of lots 51 through 66. Lots 51 through 66. New homes, new money. And to build them, they needed an entrance. An entrance they could never afford to construct themselves, but one that already existed on his land. His bridge. Marcus sat back, leather creaking under his weight. Well, there's your motive. The file had dates, signatures, drafts, revision history. These weren't Karen's pet fantasies. This was a coordinated HOA initiative. And right there in revision notes, legal counsel recommends asserting claim over riparian buffer zone for jurisdiction expansion. Riparian, meaning creek bank, meaning the thin strip of unassigned buffer land between his property and theirs, meaning they were counting on confusion. But what they didn't know was this. Marcus had built his bridge with certified boundaries. He'd walked the land with surveyors. He'd pored over plat maps until he could draw them from memory. They'd picked the worst possible landowner to target, a man who knew the paperwork better than they did. Marcus downloaded the entire Phase 2 file, saved it twice, copied it to an external drive. Then, he printed the important pages and laid them on his desk beside the forged HOA map. 2 plans side by side, one fabricated, one leaked. They matched just enough to incriminate everyone involved. They want access, he whispered, and they think they'll take it. Well, no, not from me, not today, not ever. He reached for his phone and dialed his lawyer in Montpelier. Davidson, he said when the man answered, we've got ourselves a project. Marcus woke before sunrise the next morning with a knot in his stomach. Not fear, just instinct earned after enough years dealing with people who smile while hiding knives behind their backs. He brewed coffee, stepped outside, and followed the trail toward the creek. The air was colder than usual, sharp enough to sting, the kind of cold that keeps a man awake even when he wishes this was all just a bad dream. When the trees opened and the bridge came into view, Marcus stopped dead. It wasn't just chains anymore. They'd escalated. A full steel barricade stood across the mouth of his bridge. 4-inch posts drilled deep into concrete, braced with galvanized bars, wrapped 3 times with heavy industrial chain, all locked with a padlock the size of a baby's fist. A brand new sign dangled in the middle. Emergency safety closure. Structural instability detected. Authorized by engineer Leonard Briggs. Briggs, a name that meant nothing then, but soon Marcus would learn he wasn't an engineer at all. Not anymore, not legally. But in that moment, he was the man whose forged signature had cut Marcus off from the rest of the world. Marcus set his coffee on a rock and stepped closer, laying his palm on the steel. It was freezing, cold enough to bite his skin. The kind of cold that said this barricade had been installed under cover of darkness, left to sit through the long night like a sentinel, with no pulse, no warmth, no humanity. Just a declaration. You're not going anywhere. A slow, steady breath pushed out of him. Not anger, not yet, but a kind of quiet disbelief that sinks deep and stays heavy. This wasn't vandalism. This was a deliberate blockade, a calculated move meant to isolate him, trap him on his own land, make him bend. But Marcus didn't bend. Not for people. And sure as hell not for paperwork bullies with clipboards. He pulled out his phone and called the sheriff's office. Deputy Walsh arrived 25 minutes later, a young man, polite, the kind who still believes disputes can be solved with reason and calm conversation. He took one look at the barricade and let out a low whistle. That yours? No, Marcus said. But everything behind it is. He handed Walsh his paperwork. Permits, county surveys, engineering approvals, the whole stack. Walsh read through them, nodding slowly. Well, this all looks solid. You did everything by the book. Then cut the chain. Walsh hesitated. That hesitation told Marcus everything. I can't do that, Mr. Bennett. Why not? This is my bridge on my land. Walsh pointed at the sign. Because we received that order too, emergency safety closure. If I cut this, and that bridge collapses, the liability comes down on the department. You really think my bridge is unstable? That's not the issue. The issue is a certified engineer signed that closure. Marcus almost laughed. Certified, right? Later, he'd learned Briggs had lost his license 6 years ago for falsifying soil reports. But for now, all Deputy Walsh had to go on was a printed piece of paper with a forged stamp. Walsh looked genuinely conflicted. File for an injunction. It's your best route. Until then, my hands are tied. Marcus nodded. It wasn't Walsh's fault. He'd been handed a stack of lies dressed up as authority. Walsh headed back to his cruiser. Marcus didn't. He took the long way home. The steep game trail crawling up the backside of his property. Roots slick from frost, rocks hidden under old leaves. Halfway up, his boot slipped. His knee slammed into a jagged stone so hard stars burst behind his eyes. Marcus cursed out loud. The ground, the HOA, the universe, then pushed himself upright and limped the rest of the way. By the time his porch came into view, the pain had turned into a slow, angry throb. That throbbing would later become part of his medical file. Documented injury. Another nail in the HOA's coffin. Marcus looked back toward the creek. Through the trees, he could just make out the silver barricade, glinting like a taunt in the rising sun. They hadn't just blocked his bridge. They'd endangered his life. And that crossed a line. He took a deep breath. Slow, steady, controlled. It's time to fight back. Pain has a strange way of sharpening the mind. By the time Marcus limped into his living room and lowered himself into a chair, his knee had swollen enough to press against his jeans. The throbbing was deep and deliberate, pulsing with each heartbeat, reminding him of the moment everything went wrong. This time, though, the pain wasn't just inconvenience. It was evidence. Marcus grabbed his truck keys, walked the long trail back around the backside of his property, slow, steady, one careful step at a time, and finally reached the road where his truck still sat. Every step hurt, but every step also hardened something inside him. If Karen wanted a paper war, she'd get one, and she'd lose. At the clinic in town, the nurse asked how he'd hurt himself. Marcus didn't sugarcoat it. Slipped on a frost-covered game trail because my only legal access home was blocked by an illegal barricade. The doctor documented everything: contusion, swelling, range of motion, restriction. He asked if Marcus wanted x-rays. Marcus said yes. It never hurts to have too much proof. He left with a brace, 2 prescriptions, and a stack of medical records thick enough to make any lawyer smile. Back in the truck, Marcus dialed the number that had been sitting quietly in the back of his mind since the moment he saw that barricade. Thomas Davidson, attorney. Smart, steady, ruthless when necessary. He answered on the second ring. Marcus, been a while. Wish this was a friendly call. I'm guessing it's not. What happened? Marcus laid everything out. The chains, the forged safety order, the fake engineer, the new barricade, his fall, his injury. But when he told Davidson about the expansion map he'd found, the one marking his bridge as a preferred access corridor, Davidson's tone changed. Send all of it. Photos, maps, medical records. And Marcus? Yeah? Don't talk to them. Not until we move first. Marcus hung up, drove straight to Burlington, and walked into the GPS surveying office, one of the only places in the state capable of producing sub-inch accuracy legal boundary scans. The technician recognized him immediately. You're the guy who built that concrete span over Stone Creek, right? That's me. Still standing strong. It is. The only problem is a group of neighbors who say it isn't. The technician chuckled under his breath. That sounds like a problem they made up. I'm starting to think so too. Marcus booked the earliest field survey 3 days out. They'd scan the whole property line, creek bank, bridge piers, the works. A legal certified map that nobody, not even an HOA with a taste for fiction, could argue with. When Marcus got home, he limped into his office, braced himself in the chair, and laid everything out across his desk. Medical forms, forged maps, photos of the barricade, the original HOA threat letter, and the SD card from the hidden camera he'd pulled off the railing. He slid the card into his computer. The files loaded slow, one after another. Short clips, motion triggered, mostly empty frames of creek and wind, but 2 caught his attention. The first wasn't clear, but it told him plenty. The camera had been switched on before it was fully mounted. For a few seconds, the lens swung wildly, catching quick flashes of a reflective vest, a gloved hand, the edge of a tool pouch. No face. Never that. But enough to prove someone had been on his land deliberately setting it up. Even better, Marcus heard a voice, low, muffled. Hold it steady, right here. The second clip showed silhouettes installing the barricade, blurry shapes moving with purpose, hauling metal, tightening chains, enough to identify tools, enough to match footwear tread later, enough to show intent. Marcus leaned back slowly, exhaling through his nose. This wasn't some petty HOA complaint about grass length or mailbox color. This was trespassing, criminal interference, fraud, and a coordinated attempt to force access across his land. They thought he'd fold. They thought an older man living alone near a creek would rather comply than fight. They thought wrong. Marcus organized every document, every photo, every time-stamped file into a single binder, his case, his ammunition. Then he closed the cover, set it gently on the desk, and let the weight settle into his hands. Tomorrow, the counterattack would begin. Tonight, he prepared. War wasn't coming. It was already here. 3 days passed. Without a knock, without a phone call, without a fresh envelope stuffed with bad ideas. That alone made Marcus suspicious. Silence, he'd learned, is never peace. It's preparation. And sure enough, on the morning the survey team was set to arrive, a new envelope showed up in his mailbox. Not from the HOA this time. No smug logo, no cheap printer ink. This one came from the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. That got his attention. Marcus tore it open right there on the porch. Knees still stiff, coffee still hot, breath fogging in the cold air. The letter was polite in that uniquely bureaucratic way. Courteous font, firm language. It said a complaint had been filed alleging that support columns of his bridge may obstruct seasonal aquatic migration patterns. Translation: someone complained about fish, someone meaning the HOA, someone meaning Karen. Marcus kept reading. An environmental field team will conduct a preliminary inspection within 10 business days. Please ensure access to the site. Non-compliance may result in further action. Marcus lowered the letter. Of course, he muttered. When land grabs fail, bring in the salmon. He wasn't worried about his bridge. It was designed with flow rates, sediment patterns, and wildlife in mind. But he wasn't about to trust a state team walking in blind to an HOA-manufactured narrative. So Marcus dialed a number he hadn't used in years. University of Vermont, Department of Aquatic Biology. A receptionist picked up, "Is Professor Claire Mendoza available?" There was a pause. Then a familiar voice came on. "This is Claire. It's Marcus Bennett from Stone Creek." She didn't respond for a moment. "What's going on?" she finally asked. Marcus explained. The fake land claim, the forged maps, the barricade, the injury, and now the new accusation that his bridge was somehow a threat to fish. Claire let out a long, unimpressed breath. "Marcus, the span of that creek beneath your bridge has one of the most stable flow pockets in the county. Who filed the complaint?" "Anonymous." "Oh, please," she snapped. "It's the HOA, isn't it?" "I'd bet my truck on it." "All right, I'll come out." "You sure? You're telling me someone's falsely weaponizing aquatic law against you?" Her tone hardened. "That's my field. I'm not letting bad science or bad neighbors win." 3 days later, Claire arrived in a dusty university truck with 2 grad students and enough equipment to run a full-scale field study. Waders, underwater cameras, sonar, sediment kits, temperature sensors, GPS logs, the works. Marcus met them at the trailhead, limping slightly, and led them to the creek. When Claire stood beneath the bridge, she looked over the concrete supports, the current flow, the shadow, the span cast across the water. Her grad students were already placing cameras beneath the pilings. After 20 minutes of silence, she turned to Marcus. "You said they claimed you were blocking migration." "That's the story." "Well," she said, almost laughing, "your bridge does the opposite." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "How so?" She pointed toward the underside of the structure. "See the way the current slows here? The bridge creates small refuge pockets, microhabitats. Juveniles use that as resting zones during seasonal movement. And the shade keeps the water temperature down. That's critical for survival in late summer. So it helps the fish. It helps the fish. If anything, tearing this bridge down would do more harm." That felt good to hear, really good, but it got better. While her team worked, one of the grad students walked over looking troubled. "You might want to see this," he said. He led Marcus 50 yards down creek, onto the HOA side. Marcus saw it immediately. Fresh tree stumps. Not old, not naturally fallen. Cut. Clean. Deliberate. "What the hell?" Marcus asked. The student pointed with a measuring stick. "Someone's been clearing riparian vegetation, probably to improve their view. Riparian zones are protected by both county and state law." "Is that legal?" "No. And cutting this close to the water increases sediment runoff. Bad for eggs, bad for juveniles, bad for everything." Marcus felt anger rise in his chest again, this time hotter, steadier. The HOA had accused his bridge of harming wildlife while they were illegally cutting creekside trees for better picnic views. Hypocrisy didn't even begin to cover it. Claire documented everything. GPS coordinates, drone footage, sediment samples, stump cores, erosion markers. By the time they left, she handed Marcus a preliminary written statement. Her conclusion was blunt. No obstruction detected. Bridge supports beneficial microhabitats. Observed vegetation removal on opposite bank may indicate environmental violations by adjacent property owners. Marcus shook her hand. "Claire, you just handed me dynamite." She smiled. "No, I handed you the truth. Use it." As their truck drove off, Marcus looked back at the creek, at his bridge, standing solid and calm, and at the HOA's carved-up creek bank. They wanted to use science as a weapon. Fine. But they forgot something important. Science fights back. And this time, it was fighting for him. 4 days passed after Claire's visit, and not a single HOA letter showed up in Marcus's mailbox. No threats, no accusations, no new fabricated maps. Just silence. And silence from people like Karen is never peace. Silence means planning. So, Marcus prepared. He installed 2 new trail cameras, one angled toward the approach to the bridge, another hidden deep in the brush across the creek. Infrared, night vision, motion triggered, and tied to a backup SD card buried in a waterproof pipe 6 feet away. If the HOA wanted to escalate, Marcus would be ready. On the 5th morning, before sunrise, something woke him. Not a noise, a feeling. A tension in the air. A man learns to respect after 62 years of storms, engines, and human nature. Marcus got up, slipped into his boots, put on his coat, and followed the path to the creek. Halfway down, he heard it. Metal on metal. Sharp, intentional. Not the creek, not the wind, not an accident. He stepped through the trees and froze. 2 men in reflective vests were crouched at the base of his bridge. One wielded a socket wrench. The other was using a cordless drill to loosen the guardrail bolts. And parked behind them was a white van painted with blue letters, Riverside Meadows Maintenance Division. A fake division for a fake justification behind a very real crime. Marcus didn't shout. He raised his phone, hit record, and walked out of the tree line like a man already holding the winning hand. "Morning, boys?" The one with the drill jerked upright. The other stopped mid-turn, wrench frozen in his hand. We're with the HOA," the first man stammered. "We've been contracted to begin structural removal of this." "This," Marcus cut in, stepping closer, "is my bridge on my land, and what you're doing is felony property damage." The man swallowed hard. We have authority." "From who?" He hesitated, then pulled out a crumpled sheet of paper, a memo signed by Karen B., not notarized, not stamped, not legal in any universe. When Marcus kept filming, panic flickered across both their faces. "You boys realize this could put you in prison, right?" The shorter one's voice cracked. "We're just doing what she told us." Marcus dialed the sheriff's office. 911. "What's your emergency?" "No emergency. I just have 2 individuals attempting to dismantle certified infrastructure on private property, and I have full video. Deputies are en route." The men didn't run. But the real crack came 30 seconds later. The taller man exhaled shakily, shoulders collapsing inward. Then he slowly held out his phone toward Marcus. Look, just so you know, we didn't come up with this. On the screen was a text thread from a number saved as Karen B. HOA, and the messages were unmistakable. Is it done yet? Make sure you remove the main support bolt so the structure fails completely. Cash is in the usual spot. Another bubble, don't let him see anything. Do it before sunrise. And finally, if the sheriff asks, say it's HOA property. Stick to that. Marcus didn't speak. He just let the camera roll. When the deputies arrived, the men didn't argue. They didn't deny a thing. They handed over the memo. They handed over their tools. And the phone, the real treasure, went straight into Deputy Walsh's evidence bag. Walsh looked at Marcus. Jaw tight, eyes sharp. This is a whole different level. No, Marcus said quietly. This is exactly what they've been aiming for. Walsh nodded grimly. We're placing them under arrest for trespassing and attempted destruction of private infrastructure. As the men were led to the cruiser, the shorter one broke. She paid us to do it. Cash. She said the bridge was illegal and she needed it gone before the county inspector came. Walsh turned back to Marcus. Mr. Bennett, between those texts and your video, this is going to explode. Oh, I know. You planning to sue? Planning, Marcus said. Deputy, I've already started. Walsh let out a low whistle. Well, good luck, though it looks like luck won't be the deciding factor here. When they drove away, leaving tire tracks carved deep into the frosted dirt, Marcus stood alone at the entrance to his bridge. The sun was rising behind him, turning the creek gold. A new day, a turning point. Marcus looked at the barricade, the drilled bolts, the fresh scratches on his concrete. Then he whispered, Karen, you just handed me the case of a lifetime. After the arrests, things went quiet again. Not peaceful quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from wind through pine branches or creek drift over stones. No, this was HOA quiet, calculated, coiled, waiting. Karen had taken a swing at his bridge and missed. People like her don't retreat after one mistake. They double down, triple down, and eventually implode under their own arrogance. So instead of waiting for the next blow, Marcus decided to give her something to swing at. A decoy, a lure, a big, stupid, obvious, irresistible piece of bait she could not help but attack. A fake bridge. Not a real structure, not even remotely convincing to a sane human. Just convincing enough to fool an HOA drunk on its own self-importance. Marcus called two old contractor buddies from his engineering days, men who appreciated a good joke and hated bureaucratic nonsense almost as much as he did. You want us to build what? One of them asked. Not build, Marcus corrected. Assemble. Think of it as an art installation. They laughed. Now you're speaking our language. They bought hollow PVC pipes, leftover 2x4 lumber, 3 plastic barrels, fluorescent orange tape, rebar scraps, a gallon of concrete-colored paint. Within 6 hours, they created the most ridiculous bridge Vermont had ever seen. A wobbly pink and gray contraption that sagged if you breathed too hard near it. They set it over a narrow section of the public buffer zone, technically nobody's land, but close enough to the HOA trail that Karen would see it and lose her mind on sight. They even added a sign, freshly laminated. Site of proposed bridge access project under review. Permit pending, Vermont Civil Route Division. The permit number was something Marcus invented on the spot. Number RN0FK. His contractor buddies nearly passed out laughing. This is going to hook her so fast, she won't know she swallowed the bait, one said. That's the plan, Marcus replied. They left the whole thing standing like a monument to stupidity, and then they waited. They didn't wait long. 5 days later, at exactly 9:12 a.m., 2 sheriff's deputies knocked on Marcus's door. Mr. Bennett, one said, already looking exhausted, we received a complaint from Riverside Meadows HOA that you've begun unauthorized construction of a second bridge. Marcus gave him his most innocent look. A second bridge? Where? The HOA says you built a structure downstream. Oh, Marcus said. You mean the exhibit? The deputy blinked. The what? The exhibit. An artistic commentary on the illusion of shared jurisdiction in rural Vermont. built with no foundations, no footings, and no structural intent whatsoever. Both deputies stared at him for a long second. Then the younger one asked, "So it's not a bridge?" "As real as their land claims," Marcus replied. The older deputy coughed to hide a laugh. "Well, nothing illegal here. They'll have to take it up with the county's art commission, I guess." They left, shaking their heads, but Marcus knew Karen wasn't done. The next morning, another envelope arrived, HOA letterhead dripping with indignation. "Cease and desist order. Illegal structural activity adjacent to HOA property. You are hereby instructed to remove the unauthorized access platform and cease all construction immediately." Marcus could barely finish reading it. He handed it to Davidson, who nearly fell out of his chair laughing. "We'll respond," he said, "formally, thoroughly, and with the full weight of your environmental report attached." And they did. They sent a letter titled "Regarding the Artistic Structure Mistaken for Infrastructure." Inside, they included photos showing PVC pipes and plastic barrels, proof the site wasn't on HOA land, documentation of riparian violations on their side, the environmental report stating that Marcus's bridge was beneficial to wildlife. The next part? Well, Marcus couldn't have planned it better if he tried. 4 days later, a reporter from the regional newspaper called. Someone inside the HOA had leaked the entire complaint thread. The story hit the Sunday edition, and it spread fast. Reddit grabbed it. Then Facebook, then TikTok, then some college kid made a meme comparing Karen to a medieval warlord besieging a playground toy. Within 48 hours, the HOA's Google listing was renamed Riverside Meadows Guardians of Imaginary Infrastructure. Marcus didn't change it, but he enjoyed it. Suddenly, neighbors who'd never spoken to him before were waving from their porches, laughing, shaking their heads. "That you?" one shouted from across the creek. "The guy with the art bridge?" Marcus raised his coffee mug. Guilty. But beneath all the humor, all the memes, all the sarcastic articles, something else was happening. Karen was becoming cornered, embarrassed, humiliated, increasingly unstable. And people like her don't collapse gracefully. They lash out, and when they do, that's when they make their biggest mistakes. The kind of mistakes you win lawsuits with. The fallout from the PVC bridge war spread faster than spring runoff. HOA members were furious. Not at Marcus, but at Karen. Meetings turned hostile. Memos leaked. Rumors spread. Some residents even started a petition to remove her, though nobody wanted to be the first signature on it. Fear still lived there. But fear makes people predictable, and predictable people make dangerous decisions. 5 days after the meme storm peaked, Marcus got a knock on his door. Not deputies, not neighbors. A courier. He handed Marcus a thick envelope stamped with a seal meant to look official, except Marcus had spent 40 years reading actual official documents, and this was not one. Inside was a formal notice of boundary violation from the county engineering office, or so it claimed. It included a revised survey overlay showing his bridge crossing into HOA land, a safety condemnation recommendation signed by an engineer, an urgent notice demanding his bridge be removed within 14 days. If the envelope were any thicker, it would have needed a spine. Davidson arrived 40 minutes later, holding his own copy. He set it on Marcus's dining table and said one word, "Marcus." Marcus looked up. "This is fiction," Davidson said. "Bad fiction." They combed through it page by page. The problems jumped out instantly. 1. The engineer who signed it, Leonard Briggs, same name from the fake safety closure memo. Davidson tapped the page. Check his license number. Marcus looked it up on the state registry. Revoked 6 years ago. Reason? Submitting falsified soil tests on a highway expansion contract? Marcus almost laughed. Karen hired a disgraced fraud to forge engineering letters. Davidson folded his arms. She hired a disgraced fraud who isn't legally allowed to call himself an engineer. They kept going. 2. The logos were wrong. Font slightly off. Spacing inconsistent. A county office doesn't use a pixelated seal. 3. The parcel numbers didn't exist. Davidson checked a GIS lookup. They made up land parcels out of thin air. Not even thin air, Marcus said. Stupid air. 4. The survey lines use the wrong datum set. You don't use an urban grid system on a rural topo map. Only amateurs or desperate people make that mistake. Davidson sighed. This is criminal territory now. Multiple counts. He placed a hand on the stack. Marcus, get ready. She's about to do something even dumber. He was right. That afternoon, Marcus received an email from the Department of Environmental Conservation, a new complaint filed anonymously, but citing community concern, alleging water contamination, bridge-caused siltation, disruption of native wildlife, erosion due to private construction interference. It was a laundry list of scare words copied straight from environmental law blogs. But here's the thing. Claire's team had already documented the exact opposite. Marcus forwarded everything to her. Her reply came back in minutes. I'll write a formal counter-report. Also, this level of false reporting can carry its own penalties. Penalties. That word felt good. But the real showstopper came the next morning. The survey crew arrived. 2 older men in heavy jackets, GPS rigs strapped to their packs. The leader looked familiar. Milton Hughes, Marcus said. He grinned. You didn't tell me you were this Marcus Bennett. Milton had been one of Marcus's professors decades ago, one of the men who taught him load distribution and soil density long before HOA were even words in his vocabulary. You're the one who helped me file the original topo, Marcus said. Still got a copy? Milton replied, and it still matches the county archive. He and his partner Wayne, a retired state boundary specialist, spent the whole day scanning every square foot from Marcus's property line to the HOA's edge, every coordinate, every marker, every historical overlay. By sundown, they had their result. Milton held up his tablet. Marcus, your bridge is 100% on your land. No overlap, not even an inch. Wayne chimed in. And the HOA land Karen keeps referencing, it's not even registered to them at all. It's a natural easement, unclaimed buffer. They tried to assert control over something they don't own. Davidson arrived just as they were packing up. Milton looked at him. You're the lawyer, right? Tell your friend here something for me. Go ahead, Davidson said. Milton tapped the forged survey in the earlier packet. They not only used the wrong datum set, they used the wrong decade of maps. Davidson raised an eyebrow. Meaning? Meaning, Milton said, they didn't even bother forging it well. This is amateur hour fraud. They all stood there for a moment. Marcus, Davidson, Milton, Wayne, with the icy Vermont wind blowing off the creek, 4 grown men realizing the full stupidity of one HOA president. Davidson clapped his gloves together. Well, this settles phase 1. What's phase 2? Marcus asked. He smiled. Criminal filings. Marcus looked back at his bridge, the same bridge Karen had tried to condemn, block, sabotage, and seize. Sunlight caught its concrete railings. The creek whispered under it like nothing had happened. Marcus took a long breath. I guess Karen really thought she could out-engineer an engineer. Oh, she thought much worse, Davidson said. She thought nobody would check her work. He picked up the packet of forged documents. Well, tomorrow morning a judge is going to check it. The courtroom felt warmer than Marcus expected. Not because of temperature, but because of the people. Every bench was filled. Some faces curious, some anxious, some entertained. A few reporters sat in the back row with notebooks ready, like they knew history was about to be made. Karen sat across the room at the defense table, chin lifted, blazer crisp, eyes hardened. Her lawyer looked far less confident, as if he knew the ship had a hole in it but couldn't find the bucket. Davidson leaned toward Marcus. You ready? I've been ready since the day they chained my bridge. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. Davidson began his opening, measured, calm, and sharp enough to cut steel. He explained that this wasn't a simple property disagreement, but a deliberate campaign of fraud, harassment, forgery, trespass, and sabotage, engineered and executed by the Riverside Meadows HOA under the direction of its president, Karen Brooks. He mentioned forged engineering letters, fabricated maps, illegal safety notices, false environmental complaints, and his words lingered. A coordinated attempt to dismantle a structurally sound bridge on private land. Karen stiffened. Her lawyer shifted in his seat. When their side responded, it was with brittle confidence. The HOA's attorney insisted everything had been done in the interest of community safety, that they believed the bridge unsafe, unlawful, environmentally harmful. It might have sounded convincing if you'd never seen what they'd actually done. Karen couldn't help herself. She leaned into her microphone and added, "We only acted responsibly. We never damaged anything. We never touched his bridge." Davidson smiled the way a hunter smiles when the deer steps into the clearing. He approached the witness stand. "Mrs. Brooks, to confirm, you are stating you never instructed anyone to physically interfere with Mr. Bennett's bridge?" She straightened. "Absolutely not. Never." Davidson nodded as though he appreciated her confidence. Then he looked up at the judge. "Your Honor, may we dim the lights?" The courtroom darkened. Davidson tapped his keyboard, and a video flickered to life on the projector. There, for everyone to see, were two men in reflective vests at the base of Marcus's bridge, one loosening bolts, the other drilling into the guardrail. Marcus's voice echoed in the room, calm and steady as he'd filmed it. And then came the soundbite that froze the air. "She paid us to do it. Cash. She said the bridge was illegal." Karen jerked forward in her seat. Davidson paused the video at the perfect frame, both workers clearly visible. "Mrs. Brooks, would you like to correct your answer?" The room buzzed with whispers. Karen's lawyer reached for her arm, but she pulled away. I don't know those men," she stammered. Davidson didn't argue. He didn't need to. He simply lifted a clear plastic evidence bag containing a phone the deputies had seized. "Your Honor, these are the text messages recovered from one of the workers." He read them aloud, each word a hammer striking the coffin closed. "Is it done yet? Make sure you remove the main support bolts so the structure fails completely. Cash is in the usual spot. Don't let him see anything. Do it before sunrise. If the sheriff asks, say it's HOA property. Stick to that." Karen sagged in her chair as the courtroom gasped. Her lawyer closed his eyes, shoulders sinking. Even the judge let out a long, controlled breath. Davidson wasn't done. He moved to the forged engineering reports, the ones signed by engineer Leonard Briggs. "Your Honor, Mr. Briggs's license was revoked 6 years ago. He is not legally allowed to sign engineering documents. Yet these letters were used by the HOA to condemn Mr. Bennett's bridge." Karen tried again to interject, but her lawyer whispered urgently, "Stop talking." "She didn't. That's not my fault," he told me. Davidson cut her off with perfect timing. "So you admit contacting Mr. Briggs for engineering work?" Her mouth snapped shut. The judge looked exhausted already. Next came the environmental testimony. Claire stepped forward with her calm scientific certainty and systematically dismantled the HOA's complaints. She explained that Marcus's bridge created beneficial microhabitats, that fish used its shaded currents as rest zones, and that the real ecological damage came from the HOA's illegal clearing of vegetation downstream. She ended with a line that echoed through the room. If this HOA had succeeded in removing that bridge, the creek would be worse for it, not better. By then, Karen's lawyer wasn't even taking notes anymore. He just stared at the table in front of him as if hoping a sinkhole would open and swallow him whole. At last, all testimony concluded. The judge folded his hands and stared long and hard at Karen. "In all my years on the bench, I have never seen an HOA act with this level of deceit. You falsified documents. You interfered with private infrastructure. You endangered a homeowner. And you attempted to manipulate government agencies using fabricated evidence." He issued the ruling. The HOA would pay $350,000 in damages, fees, and restitution. Karen personally owed $90,000 in fines. She was banned from serving on any HOA board in the state. The fraudulent engineer and 2 HOA board members would face criminal investigation. The boundary survey was declared final. Marcus's bridge was fully, unquestionably, legally on his land. And then the judge looked at Marcus. "Mr. Bennett, this court grants you permanent injunctive protection. The HOA may not interfere with your property again in any manner. This matter is closed." Marcus nodded. No smile, no celebration, just quiet, steady relief. Justice, he'd learned, doesn't shout. It stands upright, speaks plainly, and lets the truth do the heavy lifting. And that day, truth buried the HOA. Snow began falling the week after the verdict. Soft at first, drifting slowly through the treetops, then thickening into that kind of heavy Vermont snowfall that blankets the world in quiet. The valley looked peaceful again, peaceful in a way it hadn't felt for months. Marcus's bridge stood exactly where it always had, strong as the day they poured the concrete, glistening under a thin sheet of early winter ice. No chains, no barricades, no cameras, no drill marks from desperate midnight sabotage. Just a bridge. His bridge, leading to his home. He walked out to it that morning, coffee steaming in the cold, the air sharp enough to wake every part of the soul. The creek rolled quietly under the forming ice crust, slow, steady, unchanged by all the noise humans had tried to throw at it. Funny thing about nature? It doesn't care about HOA drama, it just keeps moving. Marcus leaned on the railing, listening to the water whisper beneath the stone. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't listening for trouble, he was just listening. Behind him, the crunch of footsteps in the snow made him turn. A pair of hikers came down the public trail, bundled in thick jackets, trekking poles tapping the frozen ground. As they drew closer, one slowed, squinted, then grinned. "Wait, are you that guy?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Which guy?" "The bridge guy. The HOA war guy. Saw it all in the paper. Man, that was wild." Marcus gave a small laugh. "Yeah, I guess that was me." The hiker gave him a thumbs up before jogging to catch up with his partner. As they disappeared along the creek trail, Marcus realized something strange. People weren't avoiding him anymore. They weren't afraid of Karen's gossip, her threats, her letters. The spell she'd held over Riverside Meadows was broken. Fear only works when people believe you have power, and Karen had none left. Davidson called that afternoon to inform Marcus that 3 HOA board members had resigned. Another was cooperating with investigators. And rumor had it, Karen had sold her house at a loss and left town, headed south to stay with a sister in North Carolina. Marcus didn't celebrate. He didn't wish her harm. He just felt finished. Some battles aren't about revenge. They're about setting things right and letting the dust settle. And settling is exactly what the town began to do. A week later, the county posted an official notice online clarifying that all unplatted buffer zones, including the one Karen tried to claim, were legally off limits to HOAs. Quietly, almost without fanfare, Marcus's bridge became the reference point for future boundary surveys along Stone Creek, a landmark, a line in the sand, something that wasn't moving no matter how hard someone pushed it. Marcus figured that deserved a marker. So on a cold, bright morning, he mixed a batch of concrete in a wheelbarrow, hauled it to the bridge entrance, and set a post. When the base hardened, he bolted a solid steel-framed sign onto it. Simple, clean, nothing fancy. It read, "This bridge is built on private land. Shall not pass." Below that, on a small bronze plate he ordered from a local craftsman, he added, "Dedicated to peaceful water, quiet mornings, and fish who mind their own business." A little humor for the next hiker who stopped to read it. As Marcus tightened the final bolt, another neighbor from across the valley passed by on the trail. He paused, admired the sign, and let out a quiet chuckle. "Well, that ought to settle it." "It better," Marcus answered. The neighbor shook his head. "Crazy what they tried to do to you." Marcus didn't respond, because there was nothing left to say. When the man was gone, Marcus walked back onto the bridge, boots crunching softly on the frost. Snow had begun falling again, big flakes drifting down like someone was trying to tuck the world under a blanket. He stood there for a long while, thinking about everything that had happened. The forged maps, the fake engineer, the sabotage, the lies, the court, the verdict, and somehow, standing there with snowflakes melting in his beard, none of it felt heavy anymore. The creek kept moving. The mountains kept watching. The land was still his, and not just because a judge had said so, because he'd fought for it. Because he'd refused to be bullied off what he built. Because some things in life are worth more than convenience, worth more than quiet, worth more than avoiding trouble. Some things are worth defending. His bridge was one of them. His home was another. That night, Marcus grilled a steak, poured a glass of the apology whiskey one of the former HOA board members had mailed him, no note, just the bottle, and sat on his porch while the snowfall thickened around the valley. The bridge was just visible through the dark, a quiet silhouette against the white, solid, untouched, exactly where it belonged. And as the snow settled on the rails and the creek whispered under the ice, Marcus realized something. The war was over. The creek had its calm back. And so did he. If someone tries to take what's yours, don't back down. Stand your ground, document everything, and let the truth fight alongside you.